Next item, moving on. This is zoning task force RFP recommendation. Item 7.
Do you want to, can I give a quick presentation
Yeah.
briefly about
Please
kind of
do.
the process? And I want to just also thank Tony Arkulevich. He was one of our RFP and zoning subcommittee members. He's also the chair of the Zoning Board of Appeals. And I want to thank Jeffrey. Jeffrey attended a lot of our meetings. And so last year, we put out a request for proposals for finding a zoning consultant. This process started, quite some time ago with the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan in the city recommended that the city look at its zoning. It hadn't been updated in over 50 years. There was a zoning subcommittee that was started under the leadership of the council, and Tony served on that committee with many others. Again, more work was done related to zoning, and I think one of the big takeaways from that project was that our zoning code was potentially, beyond just small repairs, and that we really needed to take a holistic approach to our zoning code and to really be able to have a better understanding from experts in the field. How could we modernize our zoning, make it more inclusive, and be able to help set really the course of the future build out of Kingston. And so it was one of the first times we've ever done a community written RFP. And so we had a subcommittee of more than 7 members who worked for quite some time to be able to actually develop a really comprehensive request for proposals that really outlined what we felt was the need in our zoning code, but also to really be able to explain, what Kingston was all about in an RFP, and really be able to make sure that whatever firms responded to this, that it was not just a run-of-the-mill, RFP submission. We really wanted them to get a good sense of what Kingston was all about, through the RFP process. So we did that. We received 4 submissions. In the end, we narrowed that down to 2 submissions, where we felt that there was 2 extremely qualified firms. We then interviewed those 2 firms in person here in the City Hall. We then met and actually went through and did reference checks, and so we actually called one community from each of the consultants to be able to understand what their experience was like with each of the consultants. And then we met and opened up the cost proposals, because we really wanted to make sure that when we were doing this process that we chose the most qualified regardless of the fee. The fee obviously gets factored in the final decision, which we did 2 weeks ago. And it was actually the night caucus, so that's why Jeffrey couldn't be with us that night. But we, so we had a really good positive discussion, but out of our committee, we were completely unanimous in our recommendation to the council to hire Dover Cole and Partners, or at least to suggest hiring Dover Cole and Partners. This firm has done some really exciting work on a national level related to form-based code, which is something that our committee really felt very strongly about, but also has local knowledge, because one of the main projects that they've worked on was a project called Rezone Albany, where they actually went and have worked with the city of Albany to rezone in an inclusive way some of their really new and upcoming neighborhoods, to be able to understand one, how to repurpose, but how to do so appropriately. And so with that, today I have the Dover Cole and Partners packet, which we scanned and emailed out, as well as their cost proposal. This is not a cheap endeavor. This is something that we have not done in obviously 50 plus years. And I think one of the things that Tony can attest to is that because our zoning code is so outdated, the expense that both the city as well as our residents have to go through to be able to get their property either properly zoned or to go through the variance and process in both time and money, we think has a really good kind of return on investment. So this $500 plus $1,000 investment, we think will go a really long way in being able to help make sure that our zoning code is good for the next 50 years. And while I'm not suggesting that we don't amend it like we did this one for the next 50, this is really going to give us a good baseline to be able to start. One of the things that I think our zoning committee really liked about this process was how inclusive of a public process they do in terms of the public charrettes that they do, their process of going through our code and really identifying the weaknesses. And also what we really, really liked and what really made this firm different than the other firm was the visualizations that it provides for us and our residents to really be able to understand. It's one thing to read zoning, it's another thing to visualize what zoning will do to your community and be able to actually visualize the structure of buildings growing based on which zoning code gets adopted and the structure of buildings kind of shrinking in our neighborhoods. And so that I thought was a really exciting part of this. And so Tony, I don't know if you'd like to add just a few words.
Just very few words. This particular endeavor seems like a very big nut to swallow, 500,000 approximately. But this endeavor is going to encompass a whole new form-based code. The current zoning we have, the book is about this thick, and it's called Euclidean zoning. It's typical zoning where the emphasis is on land use, while the form-based zoning, the emphasis is on buildings. So we're going to be totally revising current zoning and guidelines. I'm going to read you just quickly, because I served the better part of 2 years on 2 separate zoning committees, one run by Alderman at Large James Noble, the other by Mayor Noble. And I think part of the committee's commitment to this was seeing Mayor Noble at the table and his commitment to it. But I'm going to read you over the course of 2 years and 10 years of zoning board, being a member of the zoning board, words that have described the current zoning of the city of Kingston. Inflexible, these are some of the better comments. Inflexible, complex, reader unfriendly, antiquated, does not reflect current Kingston reality. Conflicting language, meaning conflicting language with the comprehensive plan. Unclear, user unfriendly, and the most damaging, and it makes me the most upset, when people call this current zoning code discriminatory. But I know why it's called discriminatory. We need help. The zoning board needs help. I'm getting a little old. I want to retire eventually. I'm already retired, but I want to retire from the zoning board, but I would like to see this completed. We need help. Tomorrow evening, well, first let me go backwards. I've been watching the past couple of years, year and a half, we've been on a collision course with the zoning and the zoning board. More and more of our decisions have not been based on clearly delineated language. Again, going back to those words describing it. Tomorrow evening, we have the most impactful decision in my 10 years on the board, involving millions of dollars of investment in this city. We are going to have to make a decision to approve, reverse, or modify the interpretation of the zoning enforcement officer. We as lay people will be making a determination of the zoning enforcement officer's decision regarding what can be built in Uptown Kingston i.e. the Kingstonian. The appeal is based on a decision, an interpretation of the ZO. Another party has challenged that decision. It involves the Kingstonian. That decision tomorrow evening, made by 5 lay people, just as yourselves, is going to determine millions and millions of dollars. How much easier that would have been if in fact that zoning code had been rewritten in that particular section, the mixed-use overlay district, whether that section could have been rewritten to have distinct, exact, unambiguous language regarding building residential housing in the stockade area, whether or not that housing is subject to affordable housing guidelines. The guidelines, affordable housing in our zoning code are guidelines. They're not even requirements. How much simpler it would have been to just change the word guideline to requirement. So much simpler to have said, in 2016, the mixed-use overlay district was created. Your predecessors in 2005 made a determination that housing could be above the retail stores in uptown Kingston to try to generate housing. It doesn't matter. That resolution, I saw a copy of that resolution in 2005. That resolution was never included in the zoning language. The commercial district, the C2 district in uptown Kingston does not allow residential, only because you have the mixed-use overlay that overlays the uptown zoning of C2. Residential is allowed, but it's allowed in the reuse of buildings. There's not a clear distinction and clear language on whether or not new housing can be built on a vacant lot. If you knock a building down, is that building going to be residential? Will it have to meet the requirements and percentage for affordable housing? All that could have been spelled out in distinct, exact, unambiguous language. Instead, we have confusion, conflicting, not representative of the current conditions, exciting conditions in the city of Kingston. I'll give him a little pat on the back for helping that. The exciting conditions we have in the investment in the city. We need help. This isn't the old Kingston and the 1963 code that served the old Kingston. This is a dynamic community investment, millions of dollars being investment, and quite frankly, we shouldn't have to be making a decision tomorrow. We will. We'll do it. We're prepared to do it. But there's a lot riding on it, on both sides. We need help. This looks like a big ticket item. It's a one-year endeavor. It's going to involve 6 to 10 staff of this consultant. You divide, make it a little easier. In a former life, I had to develop budgets. I had a board. I even had taxpayers who used to have to approve my budget by a majority. So I know what it is, allocating money, making fiscal decisions, but divide it by 12. Makes it a little easier to swallow. Think about what we're going to be getting monthly. Consultants, meeting with the public, identifying neighborhoods, they're called synoptic surveys, community character. This won't just be an easy task, rewriting the whole zoning code. But we need help. In the future, if it's not done now, and you wait longer, there's just going to be more collision courses coming.
The only thing that I just want to add, and then I can conclude and answer any questions that you have, is that as part of this proposal, you'll see that the overall cost for this proposal is about $499,000 and $499,394. I'm also proposing to be able to allocate an additional $25,000 in consultant money. Through this process and in the development of this RFP, we've had a long-standing relationship with Pattern for Progress, which is a kind of nonprofit municipal support organization that does a lot of research and government support. They have expressed interest and have already partnered with us in so many other initiatives. And I believe having that firm, if you will call it a firm, or that kind of government support institution with us along the way, to be a kind of our own consultants, if you will, to be able to make sure that we're getting, our bang for the buck, and we're being able to learn from lessons that Pattern has learned. So for instance, New Rochelle, we're hearing a lot about it these days, but they also, they did form-based code, and they worked with some of these communities, and so there's examples right here in the Hudson Valley that Pattern will be able to bring to us to be able to make sure that, with our work at Dover Cole, we have a local liaison that is able to come and be with us in Kingston for every meeting, at every event, and be able to make sure that, this project doesn't get held up because of a lack of kind of official administrative support. We don't want that to happen, especially with such a major project. And no offense to what happened with the comprehensive planning process, but I think for those of you that were around or heard about it, that was also supposed to be a one-year project. But because the city, to be honest, staff was just stretched so thin, and there was no one in the planning office who had the capacity to really be on that full time, all the time, our comprehensive planning process took more than 4 years. And I think that this is a good opportunity if we are willing to invest just that little bit more. I think it's going to come out in the long run to be a lot better for us and a better product. That's all I got.
I just want to add to what the mayor said, that having sat in many of those meetings, I was impressed at how prepared, well-informed, and involved the committee was. And I hope you will all support this. I see this as an investment in what we want Kingston to be in the future. One of the first things I approached Jim Noble when I started on the council was about this. So I kept seeing these things coming to us about fixing this loophole here, this loophole there, and I kept bringing up how why we weren't doing a comprehensive overall look at this, so that we don't have to keep fixing issues when they come, so that somebody can come and look at the whole code and fix it for us. And I think this is important.
Yes, ma'am.
Kingston has unfortunately a long history of following the money rather than creating a vision. And if you go back to the tearing down of the old post office, it's a small example. If you go back to urban renewal, city authorities at the time said, oh, here's money, and instead of really thinking through a vision for the future, really thinking through how to create a better community through the zoning plan, through the potential for building good parts to Kingston, they simply followed the money and ended up tearing down really important neighborhoods. And that destroys not just buildings, it also destroys social fabric. And so I think something like this is absolutely crucial for us to develop a vision so that we can look into the future and have a much more coherent sense of how to build not just better buildings, but better community through this process.
Yes. Is there any further discussion, or that's? Want me to read this?
Go ahead.
Well, first, there's a decision to make in terms of the funding source. There's several options available to the council. You'd have bonding, contingency, or fund balance. At this time, I would recommend using the fund balance. We're still in the process of measuring our 2019 results. We do know from, what I've looked at so far that, our fund balance is gonna decline from the prior year through actions the council has made to proactively utilize some of that fund balance. May not be exactly where we want it to be, so it may still be over that threshold. So there's an opportunity to use more of that fund balance to fund something rather than borrowing for it. If you were to borrow for it, you'd have to pay for it over 5 years anyway. In terms of contingency, it'd be a big hit on the contingency with having, still you have a contract that's out there that has to be settled. So, fund balance is what I would suggest, but, the council can
What's
deliberate that and choose. If you bonded it, you'd have to pay for it over 5 years. So,
Do you have a sense of what the interest rate would be?
the Corona rates are pretty good right now. It would be short term. You probably would never go to long-term bond. You'd bond for 1 year at a time. It's fluctuated a lot in the last several weeks. It's fluctuated a great deal. The rates right now are 0.75%, but that's not the norm. Right now, there's when we go to renew it, like if we probably borrow next in August, I don't know what that rate's going to be. I think the rates are going to fluctuate a lot between now and then. And then when you renew it the following year, the rates could be vastly different from what they are now.
Particularly,
Typically, I think, pre this Corona scare, you probably were in the 1.5–2% range. But once again, here's an opportunity potentially to use cash that we have available right now rather than bonding for it and trying to reduce the city's debt burden. And I think, in terms of the payments, this process is going to take a little bit of time, so it's not going to be an immediate cash flow. So if you were to use fund balance for it, it's going to be over a period of many months. So it's not going to be a, one check we're writing it and it's gone.
that's my preference, is to use fund balance.
So I would agree with that.
I don't see why we want to spend extra money on the bond.
Do we have to vote on that first?
Yeah, there's a committee report here.
No. Which way we're gonna go?
I think you could do a straw poll amongst yourselves and then vote on a committee report.
Oh, the straw poll with respect to...
Amongst yourself as to how you'd like to fund.
Oh,
I'm
totally sold on the fund balance. Is that what you mean, fund balance versus?
Yeah, well, the question came up on bonding, right? And then bonding versus fund balance. Is there anyone who doesn't want to use the fund balance, would rather bond for it? Would rather borrow for it?
I just want to make sure everybody in the committee gets a vote and not just two people. So that's what I was leading at. If it's three options, you as a chair should be going around and making sure.
It's open.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
of course. So on a straw poll, what do you want? How do you weigh in on this?
I'm going with the fund balance.
Fund balance?
Fund balance.
It's got the word fun in it.
Pardon me?
Yes, fund balance.
All right, okay, all right.
Fund balance.
Here you can read
All
it.
right, okay. From the controller on behalf of the mayor, authorize the utilization of $524,394 in fund balance from the general fund to provide funding for the zoning code initiative described in the mayor's letter dated March 3rd, 2020 through the following 2020 budgetary transfers. Two consultants, $524,394.
I think I just wrote down a wrong number here. Contingency from fund balance.
Yeah.
Let me just write down. Sorry. That's a 5 minute award.
Okay,
Yep.
is there a motion?
Motion. Second.
Randy? And Steve. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
I'd like to say, on behalf of your zoning board, I thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you for coming tonight.
Maybe we
Mayor.
should have took 50 years.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
It
It feels good to have this support.
Comments were great to hear, Jim.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, we'll make the decision tomorrow,
Yeah,
one way or another.
yeah.
That's where we do. That's where we get the big bucks.
Right. Seventh item, eighth item on the agenda is